Senators, I'm not going to take time to review all of the reasons I think we're better off with a state insurance exchange rather than defaulting to a federal exchange. You've heard that from me and many others already, but I do want to hit some highlights. I received a call from a nice lady a few days ago encouraging me to vote against House Bill 248. I appreciated very much the fact that she was polite and was willing to listen to my point of view as well as to give me hers. Toward the end of our conversation, she asked me if I had read the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. I told her I had not. And she responded that she thought it was unconscionable, or words to that effect, that I and others would be voting on something we had never read. I politely explained to her that I would not be voting on the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, that I would be voting on House Bill 248, and that just before she called, I had finished reading it once again. Senators, I wish that I was going to be voting on the Affordable Care Act. That would be such an easy vote for me. I could vote no without giving it a second thought. And I even confess that I could vote no without needing to read the entire act. I wish that were the vote we were going to make today, but it is not. In the minds of many, however, it seems to them that we are. Most of the arguments I hear against the state exchange and the legislation we're considering today are really arguments against the Affordable Care Act. We're told how a state exchange will raise premium rates, how it will mandate coverage that many think are inappropriate, including coverage for certain types of contraceptives. We're told that it will be expensive to administer and that it takes us one step closer to a national single-payer health care system. I admit all of these things, Senators, will happen, and I don't like it a bit. But the most important thing that I will say today is this. Those things are going to happen because the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act was enacted into law and that efforts to repeal it or declare it unconstitutional have been unsuccessful. It is the Affordable Care Act that is doing those things to us. Enacting a state exchange as opposed to defaulting to a federal exchange is an effort to minimize those negative impacts. And let me say that one more time, please. Enacting a state exchange as opposed to defaulting to a federal exchange is an effort to minimize the negative impacts of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Senators, we cannot fix it all. I wish we could. We don't have as much flexibility as we would like. I wish we did. But in my mind, the fact that we can't fix all of the things we don't like about the Affordable Care Act doesn't mean that we should not retain control to the extent that we can. We are going to have a health care exchange as mandated by the federal government. It will either be a state-based exchange, a federal exchange, or some combination of the two. I wish there were another option. Many believe there is, and we're criticized for not supporting a free market option. We have a free market option now. Anyone who wishes can buy insurance from a private insurance carrier, and you'll be able to continue to do that after the federally mandated insurance exchange is implemented. Excuse me. Excuse me again. But having free market options available in the states doesn't prevent the federal government from creating a federal exchange for Idaho if we don't create a state exchange. I don't know how else to say that. So take all the arguments against an exchange and send them to the folks in Washington, D.C. They're the only ones who can fix that problem, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating as can be, but that's where we are. So if we must have either a federal exchange or a state exchange, why opt for a state exchange? That's what this debate should be about. That's the decision we will make today, again, whether to have a state exchange or default to the federal government. Those of us who support a state exchange believe a state exchange will be less costly, less onerous for the citizens of Idaho, provide more product choices, and make better use of the insurance professionals who are in this state. But there's another major reason to support a state exchange over a federal exchange. If you believe President Obama is moving toward a single-payer health care system, and if you don't want that to happen, please consider this question. Would it be easier to move all of the states to one national system if all the states were already defaulting to the same federal health exchange, or would it be easier to move to a single system if states were operating their own state-based exchanges? I believe it would be much more difficult to move to a single national system if many states were operating their own state-based exchanges. Senators, I thank you for being patient with me as I reviewed the bill once again after we had read it, and for making these additional comments. Mr. President, debate is open.